pregame show. I'm joined tonight by Megan Gauer, who's filling in for Gabe Ibrahim. I'm not going to make all the same jokes I did the last time. That took too long. Megan, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Calvin. I'm really excited for tonight's slate of games and what we've got to talk about from this weekend. So how are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm excited as well. We got Arizona, Oregon coming up, as well as South Carolina versus Uconn in 36 minutes. Both of them are tipping off. But first, we got a little bit of action to break down from, over the weekend. Several good games. Obviously, a few ranked teams went down. Let's just start it off in chronological order. Friday afternoon, the first big upset. We had Washington State defeated then number 5 UCLA 67-63. Megan, what did you think about that game?
Yeah, well, Washington State not ranked right now, but has made an appearance in the top 25 this season. Obviously a team that's threatening a lot of opponents in the Pac-12. The big story there has been their freshman kind of all season long. Charliesse Walker has been absolutely phenomenal for them. I think she had 28 points in the game on Friday. So, it's another really big night for her. Probably someone that's in that freshman of the year conversation that maybe doesn't get as much attention because she's West Coast school and, not one of your traditional Pac-12 powerhouses. But she's the main story going into that. And then UCLA just really struggles to shoot the ball in this one. And I think the number from them that jumped out at me is that they only had 10 offensive rebounds in the game, which is something they kind of live by in their game. They don't shoot the ball fantastically, but they usually do a really nice job on the offensive glass to make up for that. And that 10 offensive boards was their second lowest of the season.
Yeah, we should mention too that Washington State followed that up 2 days later with a 10-point loss to USC, who's not going to the tournament. So that's college basketball this year. It doesn't make any sense, which is awesome. But yeah, you brought up Charliesse Walker, like you said, maybe not getting enough hype compared to like a Paige Beckers or Caitlin Clark. She also wasn't ranked in the top 100 in ESPN's recruiting rankings because she's from New Zealand, so no one knew who she was. But what I loved about what she did is, in particular, in that win over UCLA. Maybe Shay can put up the video here if she has it. In the last minute and a half, basically they just brought ball screens for her and let UCLA loves to switch, so they switched on her with Lauren Miller and just let her go one-on-one. She scored the last, I believe, 9 points of the game. She was the only Washington State player to score in the last 4 minutes. In the last 90 seconds, she had 8 points. So really, just especially for a freshman, someone you can rely on down the stretch as a closer, someone to close out that game. And I think, I don't know if we have those videos up here or not, but on the first one, all right. So on the first one, they brought a ball screen to her and got her switched on Lauren Miller, like I said, and she just drove the basket and got fouled, knocked down both free throws. The second one, they brought her on an off-ball screen, but still got the switch on Lauren Miller, and then she just pulled up and knocked down a deep three, which they were down 2 at the time, put them ahead by 1 with like 40 seconds left, basically, what ended up being the game winner. So I really loved, what she was able to do down the stretch, and that type of poise, being able to close out a game and score, like I said, the 8 points in the last minute and a half against a top 5 team. It is really impressive from someone, who's just in her first season of college basketball.
Right. That's huge. I think that's kind of something that every team needs, right? You need that player that you're going to go to in that final minute when you need the big shot. And then to have a freshman that's ready to take that shot is, I think, huge for Washington State. Obviously, she's been the best player on the floor for them all season long. And then her being able to step up in those big moments just makes her even better.
And speaking of stepping up in big moments, let's pivot to Texas A&M over Arkansas. Watching this game, it felt like deja vu. I don't know if you watched the first game a few weeks ago or not. Jordan Nixon hit the game winner over Arkansas with under a second left in both of these games. Jordan Nixon has to be the most hated woman in the state of Arkansas right now. But definitely big time clutch performance. And in this one, she didn't score in the second half until that, basically game winning shot. So what did you see out of Texas A&M and Arkansas?
Yeah, obviously that wasn't a thriller yesterday, kind of the last game I watched before the Super Bowl last night, and it was a fun ending. And then, yeah, like you said, Jordan Nixon hits that huge shot for them, second time this season in that matchup. Another big win for Texas A&M. I think the thing that stands out to me most from Texas A&M is they just keep beating all these like ranked opponents in the SEC. They've had a couple losses, but they keep kind of getting those wins in the big games, and I think that's important to see for them down the stretch. I mean, they're building that tournament resume like crazy.
Yeah, and then on the flip side, Arkansas keeps losing all these close games. It's almost opposite sides of the coin with these two teams where you see the records in there. Arkansas has lost 7 games, Texas A&M's lost 1, but both matchups they were right there with each other. Arkansas, they got that win over Uconn and they got the win over Baylor earlier in the year, but when it has come to SEC games, it feels like this keeps happening to them. They keep losing at the end of close games. I feel like they're that team in the tournament that's going to be a little bit underseeded and undervalued because the record is going to not be very shiny in the sense that they keep losing these close games, but they can compete with anyone, and those close games could flip and go their way, at any point. So this is a team that I wouldn't want to see in the tournament because I don't think they're going to be seeded properly compared to how dangerous they are.
Yeah, they're the team that if we had like a luck ranking like Ken Pom does, they'd be really low in that luck column, but they're right in it in all those games. And I mean, of course, that comes from their backcourt, which just continues to be great. It was Amber Ramirez that really kept them in it in this one. She had, I think, 5 3-pointers in the game. But they're just a team that when you look at their, record, it's kind of like, they lost 7 games. Why are we talking about them? But the 7 games that they lost, like, it's just, they're so close and they're 2 big teams for the most part. So a team that's kind of ready to compete with anyone in and out, and not someone I'd want to see in the tournament.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, that luck stat that Ken Pom does, I'm going to have to try to put together those numbers, maybe tweet them out, because I would love to see where Arkansas is and that they have to be very, very lowly ranked. On the Texas A&M side, though, this win, I think, keeps their hopes alive for an SEC title, still with 1 loss, in South Carolina, obviously undefeated in the SEC. They haven't played each other yet. They don't play each other until, if the game happens, we never know this year. If the game happens, though, February 28th, the last scheduled game of the regular season, if both win out, that game will be for the SEC title, with Texas A&M owning the tiebreaker, obviously, if they win head-to-head and both finish with 1 loss.
Yeah, I hate that game is like the last game of the regular season, because if something does happen, the chance that it gets rescheduled is so slim, which is really unfortunate because I think it's kind of going to be that highlight game of the SEC. Very well could be for the title. So hopefully we get it. Fingers crossed that nothing crazy happens that week and we get to see that one.
Definitely, yeah. Texas A&M certainly, needs it if they're going to win that SEC crown. Moving on to, maybe the biggest upset, certainly the most, high-profile upset, I think, of the weekend was North Carolina over North Carolina State, 76-69. So North Carolina State, we talk about Washington State. They beat number 5. They lose to a non-tournament team. Then North Carolina State, last 3 games, unranked loss, win over number 1, unranked loss. Megan, make it make sense for me.
I mean, it doesn't make sense, but like you've said already, probably that it's just the way women's college basketball seems to be going this season. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I think, going into that game on Sunday, everyone obviously expected NC State to win it. NC State very likely could have been number 1 in this week's poll, with now having 2 wins over number 1 teams and a pretty handed win over Louisville. But then they drop it to UNC. It's just, I think UNC really won that game from the 3-point line. They made 11 threes, shot 42% from beyond the arc, and NC State just couldn't really answer it. They didn't shoot well as a team as a whole, but I mean, just, it's hard to come back. If a team hits threes like that, you've really got to excel in a lot of other areas, and NC State just didn't do that on Sunday.
Yeah, you can look at a lot of games, I feel like, and I don't think people realize how important it is to make shots. That rebounding, turnovers, all that stuff can may swing, a close game, 1 possession or 2. But at the end of the day, the team that makes more shots is almost always the team that wins the game. And UNC was connecting, really just this whole game. I thought Janelle Bailey from UNC was maybe sort of the unsung MVP of this game. She only had 4 rebounds and was 2 for 9 from the floor, but she drew 3 fouls on Alyssa Cunane, even after she herself got into foul trouble. She sat a lot of the first half with 2 fouls and ended up with 4. but she still wasn't afraid to go at it, with Aliyah Cunane, and she took a charge on her in the third quarter, drew an and one foul on her on the other end, later in the same quarter, and Cunane ended up fouling out of this game in, because of those 3 fouls, and only played 21 minutes. That's a big deal, I think, when NC State is. So they're not very deep. They played 7 in this game. They played 7 in their last game. They really need Aliyah Cunane to stay on the floor. So I thought that was pretty big from Janelle Bailey. But what did you see from? What do you think where do you think I should say NC State goes from here? What do you think they need to do to sort of turn this around now with 2 losses to unranked teams in the last 3?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of it is what you just pointed to, right? That Cunane only played 21 minutes. I mean, their other unranked loss, she was out, so she didn't play. That team kind of runs through her the most. She's clearly the star of the team. She's going to be that big player for them, and she's not on the court. They're going to have trouble, and I think that's what we've seen in these 2 unranked ACC losses. And then, of course, she is on the court in that Louisville game, and they're able to get the win. So I think being able to keep her out of foul trouble and keep her on the court is just really important for NC State. They, like you said, they're not deep, so they don't have a lot of options that are going to be a good replacement for her if you have to take her off the court. So just the more minutes you can have her on the floor, the better off they're going to be.
Yeah, and, I definitely agree. And not to slight, anyone else on NC State. Raina Perez has been phenomenal. I think she's great in this game, had 13 assists. Jakia Brown-Turner is one of those maybe better players in the country that casual fans haven't heard of, but there's definitely no denying Aliyah Cunane's importance to be on the floor. And especially regardless of, even if, she does have this talent around her, there's just, like we said, there's not enough bodies when she's not on the floor. So definitely going to be important to NC State making a run. They stayed at number 4 after a weird week, beating number 1 and losing to unranked team. I think that's about right for them. In terms of, another maybe mid-major result, not another mid-major result, but a mid-major result that was big from the weekend. South Dakota State swept South Dakota in, what is basically annually the biggest battle for the Summit League championship. No one really competes with those 2 in that league. So at this point, South Dakota State, barring something crazy, should win that Summit League crown based on that sweep. What do you see from those 2 games?
Yeah, I mean, obviously just a fun series, right? They play a game on Friday and Saturday, so back-to-back games, which is not something we see a lot, which in obviously both at home for South Dakota State, but a lot of fun to just kind of see those games back-to-back days. It gives you a better answer, too, of like, who's the better team, right? Because, one game, sometimes, something goes wrong for one team or whatever, and it's that one head-to-head isn't always a great measure of, where they stand against each other. But I think playing 2 back-to-back games like that and then South Dakota State winning both, it gives you a little bit more of a barometer that, okay, they are probably the better team. They win. Not that 2 out of 2 is perfect, but it gives you a little bit better of a measuring stick. And I mean, I think the thing that stands out pretty obviously from South Dakota State there is Maya Selland, 17 points and 9 assists in the first game, and then 26 points in the second game. Just absolutely fantastic series from her.
Yeah, this we'll have to keep an eye on. I think this week releasing her Hoop Stats Becky Hammond watch list, the final 10 players in the mid-major player of the year. But Maya Selland might be able to crack that top 10, and I think Hannah Shervin on the other side for South Dakota should have a pretty good case to crack that top 10 as well. So this was a good battle. Going back to what you talked about with UNC, NC State though, when threes are falling. Or when threes are not falling, it's really hard to compensate for that. I think this was sort of the story of this series too, in one aspect, in the sense that the first game was just a beatdown. South Dakota State won 64-45. It really was never close for the entire second half. And South Dakota shot 2 for 20 from 3, hence the 45 points. It's hard to make up for that. They come back, obviously, you're not going to shoot 2 for 20 from 3. Really no one, but especially if you're a good team like that. They come back and they were leading for much of the second half in the second game, 75-67 with under 3 minutes left, and South Dakota State scored the final 13 points. So definitely, like you said, the 3-pointers, can really change things. But at the end of the day, South Dakota State still able to pull out this the second game as well. In the end with that big run.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, kind of 2 very different games, and that 3-pointer thing, I think it's something you can point to in so many games. It's just like if a team hits a lot of threes or takes a lot of threes and misses a lot of threes, there's only so much the other team can do to counteract that. And I think classic case of that on Friday night.
Yeah, definitely. So South Dakota State looks like they're probably going to be the Summit League champion. How much that matters, they get to hang a banner, and it's a lot of pride. Obviously, the Summit League plays, 8-team neutral site, no buys, so it's not gonna necessarily help them in the conference tournament. But hanging a banner is always cool. In another mid-major result, mid-major versus power conference at least. Before we get to our previews, we want to touch on this last one. Oregon barely escaped UC Davis, 63-57. UC Davis was within a point with a few minutes left of this game. They were sneakily one of 3 undefeateds left in the country before this result. Only 5-0. They've had a lot of games canceled due to COVID. But did you get a chance to watch this game or go back and look at any of the highlights?
I didn't watch it live, but yeah, I watched some of the highlights and some clips of it. And I mean, I think in one way, like Oregon coming off a pause, probably a little rusty. They probably played this game with the intention of not coming into their first game tonight when they're playing Arizona. It gives them a little bit of a tune-up coming off that COVID pause. But I think, UC Davis gave them basically everything they could handle. They just barely eke out the win there. So a fun matchup for sure.
Yeah, just one point I wanted to touch on before we get to our previews is that UC Davis, so they're now 5-1. They have 6 regular season games. You need 13 to qualify for the tournament. However, they count the conference tournament as one of those. So you need 12 regular season games. They currently have 6, which means they need 6 more. Their remaining schedule has 6 games left on it currently. So they need to play all 6 in order to qualify for the tournament. Unless today is the first day that the NCAA is accepting waivers or accepting, appeals for teams who aren't able to play 13 games to be able to get into the tournament. I don't know how they're going to decide that. It's the NCAA, so probably a dartboard or something. But UC Davis, I really hope they get in because we saw in this Oregon team, in this Oregon game, that they could be a sneaky, upset pick in terms of a mid-major, maybe surprising some people. So I hope that they either get that waiver or that they are able to play all 6 of these remaining games that they have on their schedule.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Hopefully they get kind of through most of those remaining games. I think it's really hard to decide if a team that's 5-1 can make it into a tournament. I mean, obviously they've got a month to play some more games, but it's just how do you compare a 5-1 team to a 15-1 team or a 20-1 team? It's basically impossible. So hopefully they get some more games in here and then are able to kind of make that case and make it to the tournament.
Yeah, definitely. We'll see if they do, and might show up on some brackets. Come time to fill out our brackets. So let's see. We got 20 minutes left, 19 minutes left. Let's get to the games tonight. We have 2 really big games tonight. Let's start with Arizona, Oregon. We'll save. I don't want to say the best for last, but kind of. Nothing against Arizona, Oregon. You're a Uconn person. I'm sure you consider this one the best. It's also 1 versus 2.
Right.
So we'll save the best for last. Let's start with Arizona, Oregon. It's number 10 versus 11. It was number 10 versus 11 last time they played too, but now it's flipped. Arizona is 10, Oregon is 11. It was vice versa the last time they played. Arizona really frustrated Oregon in that first win on January 14th. They won 57-41, created a lot of turnovers with the press, 23 turnovers, a season high for Oregon. What did you see from that game, and what do you think Oregon needs to do differently, or what are the keys to tonight's game?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of that game where Oregon loses to Arizona 57-41 was Arizona's defense, right? I mean, for Oregon, especially just the way that they typically play to only score 41 points it's a strong defensive effort and a kind of a gritty performance from Arizona there. But really on both sides, it was kind of a grinded out game. I mean, Arizona still only gets to 57 points, not a high scoring game at all. So I think, again, kind of looking at this one, the defense is going to tell the story. But I think you look at also at 2 very different teams. You've got an Arizona team that kind of runs through Ari McDonald. I mean, she's a big playmaker for them on the defensive end, but offensively, I found the stat when I was prepping yesterday, but I thought was pretty insane. She's scored or assisted on basically 45% of Arizona's field goals so far this season. So really their offense runs through her. And then you've got Oregon that's a little bit more balanced. Their freshmen taking up Pau, and then Aaron Boley and Naira Sabale all kind of average double figures for them. It tends to be a little bit more balanced effort for the Ducks.
Yeah, and so going back to Arizona's defense that you mentioned, we talked about Oregon first matchup, season high in turnovers, 23, season low in points, season low in field goal percentage, basically across the board on Oregon's offensive end. Season worst came in that game to Arizona, which is what Arizona really hangs their hat on. I'm not sure if it's good or bad that Oregon played a game, a few days ago to come off of their 2-week layoff, whether it's, they didn't have as much time to prep for this game, maybe you could say, but also they shook the rust off against UC Davis a little bit. So I'm not sure which one it is. We'll see tonight. To me, though, what stands out the other way that I think Oregon needs to take more advantage of than they did in the first matchup is their size. Because Arizona, the reason they're able to press and create all these turnovers is because they're small and they're quick. And, Erin McDonald is 5'6". They start basically, 6'2" at center. Whereas Oregon now, they have Sedona Prince at 6'7". They have Niara Sabally, you said, at 6'5". Lydia Giomi comes off the bench at 6'6". The only player who can really, on the Arizona side, who doesn't start, but who can even sort of compete size-wise is Lauren Ware off the bench at 6'5". So I think Oregon really needs to sort of exploit that size advantage more so than they did in the first matchup. And maybe even that means putting one of those bigger players like a Sedona Prince sort of in the middle of the court against the press and trying to get her the ball so she can just pass over the top of people, because they could not figure out that press in the first matchup. But when you have 6'7", 6'6", 6'5", and you can put any two of those three on the court at once, and you're going against a fairly undersized power conference team, you really should be able to dominate the paint.
Yeah, exactly. And if I'm remembering right, I think the game back earlier in January was one of Sedona Prince's first games back from injury. She hadn't had a lot of time on the court this season. So I'm sure that played a role in that game as well. So I'd be interested to see kind of how she improves on her performance going into this game. I think that could be a big factor for them to give them Oregon a little bit of a leg up there. Is obviously, like you said, her size is not really something that Arizona has an answer for. So if she can kind of dominate inside, that should give the Ducks a much better chance in this one.
Yeah, I'm just pulling it up here. I believe that was actually her very first game back coming off of that injury, which, yes, it was. She hadn't, at that point, that was January 14th. She had not played since December 21st. So, not quite a month. Yeah, and she only played 14 minutes in that game, which I don't believe was due to foul trouble. Let's see. Well, she did have 4 fouls. Okay. But they need her on the court. They need more than 14 minutes out of her. And they need her to, use every inch of that length because, not very many teams in the country, but especially Arizona, really, I don't think can match up with that. And, the other thing I think, in terms of from an Oregon perspective too, against that press, is I love Tahina Paopao. I think she's been awesome. I think she's another sort of in that Charliesse Ledger-Walker category of underrated freshman or under talked about freshman. But she's not Sabrina, not yet at least. And when you have a player who's a 4-year starter like Sabrina Ionescu, who's maybe the best, certainly one of the best college basketball players of all time, at running the point. That makes life a little bit easier when a team throws a press at you like that, because you have that experience, someone who's seen it, who knows who to get the ball to. Maybe how Debbie Antonelli says, the 3 W's, the who, the what, the where, or whatever. I probably got those wrong. Sorry, Debbie. But Tahina Paopao, is every once in a while still able to be flustered a little bit by a really skilled, and quick team who can bring pressure like that. She's very impressive for a freshman in that regard. And in the half court, she's phenomenal. But I'll be interesting to see, her second time going against it now, specifically this Arizona press, how she fares as well.
Yeah, she's going to be a little bit more prepared. That's the big thing with freshmen, is they learn a lot in their first season. So she's seen it once. I expect her to handle it better today than she did, but she is still a freshman. So like you said, she's not going to handle it like Sabrina would have handled it in her senior season. That's just not something to expect. And of course, you've got on the opposite end, you've got Ari McDonald on that, running that press. That's just one of, she's an elite defender. That's part of what makes her WNBA draft stock so high. So you've got the experience on the other end of the court, which just makes it a little bit more challenging for Oregon. Yeah,
definitely. Especially in a year where, there wasn't a lot of off-season sort of cohesiveness for, power freshmen like her to really sort of gel with their teammates coming into the season. So November, December is really when obviously they had practices before that, but sort of a little bit more learning on the fly for players like that, I think, than maybe in a typical season. Did you have any other points you wanted to bring up about this game, or should we jump into the game of the night?
Yeah, let's jump into the big one, number 1 versus number 2, which is really exciting. I think it's if I'm correct, the first number 1 versus number 2 matchup of the season. We've seen a lot of changes at the top, but I'm pretty sure it's the first top 2 ranked teams of the season. So really excited for this one tonight.
I believe it is. Yeah, we almost had it, obviously, with Louisville, NC State, and then Virginia Tech decided to say, nope to that. So now we're going to get it this week instead. South Carolina knocked off Uconn 70-52 last year. Is the Gamecocks' first win over Uconn, in the history of this series. What do you think needs to be different for Uconn this year?
Well, I think in some ways they're just a different team this year. They've got a lot of new pieces. I think one thing that hurt them a lot in that game was the front court battle, which I think is the headline going into this one, right? It's like the Aliyah Boston versus Olivia Nelson-Ododa matchup. Olivia Nelson-Ododa now has not Aliyah Boston, there's 2 Aliyahs, Aliyah Edwards by her side on the Uconn bench. So you've got 2 front court players from Uconn now, a little bit more size just in general in this roster. Some of the guards that they've added are a little bit bigger. So I think they're just a little bit more well-equipped to handle that front court matchup. But then again, you've got now Aliyah Boston isn't a freshman, she's a sophomore. So she's a better player than she was last year too.
Yeah, and speaking of better players and upgrades over last year, Paige Beckers is Dawn Staley said, in her own words, in the press conference leading up to this game, no disrespect to Crystal Dangerfield, but Paige Beckers is probably an upgrade. And so I know you wrote a piece, for the Uconn blog. Everyone should go check it out. Megan's piece about, the headliner is the bigs, but don't sleep on the guards in this matchup as well. There's some phenomenally talented guards in this matchup. Zaya Cook on the other side too, on a lot of award watch lists. So what do you think what's more important, first off, the matchup of the bigs or the matchup of the guards?
I feel like it's really hard to tell. I think either of them can make or break the game. So, if one team wins both of those matchups, they're going to win the game. If they kind of split who wins what one, I think it could go either way. I don't know that, one is more important than the other necessarily. I think, South Carolina or Uconn can hurt you a lot inside, and then they can also both hurt you a lot in their guards in the way that they can create their own shots and do a lot of different things. So I don't know, it could really go either way.
Yeah. Paige Beckers, is we didn't get a chance to talk about our National Player of the Year candidates, but people are probably going to hate me for saying this, but I think she's maybe should be in that conversation. At me on Twitter if you want, whatever. All the Uconn haters. I'm not a Uconn guy, but
she was going to be on my list. She's one of 10 players in the country that's top 10, or probably one of 2 players in the country that's in the top 10 for win shares and win shares per 40. So I think she's got a building case, and she's got a chance to make a better case for herself tonight. As does Aliyah Boston, though, another player that's in that National Player of the Year conversation and has a chance to make kind of a statement for her case tonight as well. So you've got 2 National Player of the Year candidates in this game that have got a chance to make their argument for that award a little better. I know we didn't really have that full conversation, but it's something I think is still pretty wide open. So
yeah, definitely. It's definitely, sorry to cut you off. It's definitely wide open. And that's a good point about, two players, on a big stage on national TV. By the way, this game is on FS1. The Arizona-Oregon game is on ESPN2. National TV in a 1 versus 2 matchup. A lot of voters are going to be watching, obviously. And this is in particular for Paige Beckers, I think, the best team that she has and maybe will play this season until maybe a deep tournament run. They played DePaul, they played Arkansas, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. Those are the only 2 ranked teams that they have played.
Tennessee too.
So far. Yeah. Tennessee, that's right. Yep. I know they had a couple get canceled due to COVID in terms of games that actually happened. None of those teams were top 10. So in South Carolina, of course, this is a 1 versus 2 matchup, like we said. So definitely a big stage for some of these players to prove themselves. What I'm interested in this game, going back to the matchup of the bigs, Nelson-Ododa versus Aliyah Boston. So last year, Aliyah Boston, her first 23 games of the season, did not attempt a 3. Came out against Uconn and took 5 of them. She only made 1 of them, but she took them. And Dawn Staley said afterwards, we all know players shoot better in practice than they do in games, And it's just the the bright lights and the situation is it's always tougher to shoot against a game or against a live opponent, I should say. But Dawn Staley said she had seen this in practice. Aliyah Boston being able to maybe step out and at least sort of knock down threes. She's not exactly prolific out there yet, but she can knock it down if you leave her wide open. And she decided to sort of run some stuff for her, some pick and pops and stuff like that. But to save it for the Uconn game last year, because that's when she wanted to pull out all the stops, obviously. That's the biggest game to date of the season. So she saved it. Aliyah Boston comes out, takes 5 threes after playing 23 games without taking one. Now everyone knows that Aliyah Boston, again, isn't a huge threat out there, but is willing to take them. And so I'm interested to see, how much she tries to step out there and pull Nelson Adota away from the rim, because they're both phenomenal shot blockers, So you really want on either side, you want to pull them away from the rim to open up, the drives and the paint, because if they're sitting around the rim and you're a guard, I mean, you're not scoring. You're just not. If they're waiting back there for you, it's over. So I'm interested to see how Aliyah Boston, what Dawn Staley does to use Aliyah Boston on offense.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting to watch. I mean, I feel like she might end up just inside. I think going into this one, I expect that Aliyah Boston's going to have the advantage in the paint. I expect kind of South Carolina to win that front court battle. So I think a lot of it is going to, not that the guard battle is more important, but it might come down to the guard battle, because I kind of expect South Carolina to keep that edge in the paint. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if she tries something different too. Like you said, we saw it last year. We've seen Uconn do some stuff that this year too. Occasionally, Olivia Nelson Adota puts it up from 3. That's going to stretch your defense a little bit more. She, again, also not a very reliable 3-point shooter. So it'll be interesting kind of to see if either team takes that route. But I mean, I expect South Carolina to win inside. I think the guard battle is going to keep it interesting. You've got Zia Cook and Destiny Henderson for South Carolina, both fantastic guards, both players that can create their own shots and score in a variety of ways. And then on Uconn, of course, you have Paige Beckers, who's just the last few games has been on kind of like an unreal level of just like averaging 28 points per game. She's shooting like, I think 19 for 25 from 3 over the last 4 games, which is 76%. It's just, it doesn't even make logical sense. And then of course you've got Kristen Williams, Avina Westbrook rounding that out as well. So just kind of a lot of great guards that I think could kind of make or break it for either team.
Yeah, to your point about Paige Becker, I mean, there's very few guards I think who would do that in warmups. Would you say 76% for 25 attempts? I mean, there are like I said, there are very few guards who shoot that well with no defense even. I would probably shoot like a tenth of that well. I would go out and take 25 threes. I'd make 2 of them with no defense. But so she's on a historic pace. She's shooting 60% from 3. May or may not break the record, for a single season. On the other side, with the guards, we talked earlier about how 3-point shooting can be so vital. It was in games like UNC versus NC State and in the first South Dakota versus South Dakota State matchup. And in this one, you have Paige Beckers, who knocks down everything she puts up from behind the arc. And then you have Destiny Henderson, Bria Beal, both shooting around 39%. Zia Cook is in the 40s. Earlier in the season, teams were really crowding Aliyah Boston and coming off of those shooters really other than Zia Cook, because none of those guards had necessarily proved in the last few seasons or early in the season that they were capable of being threats out there. So they're just swarming Aliyah Boston. Now they sort of have. Now they have at least three of those guards who can really step out and legitimately hit that 3, which has been a big development for them. They're still very inconsistent. I was looking through, South Carolina's game by game box scores. They have, so last 2 games they've shot over 50% from 3. The previous 3 games they shot in the teens from 3. So since their early season tournament, I forget where it was, one of those tournaments that was supposed to be in a tropical place and wasn't because of COVID. Since then, since that loss to NC State, in 13 games, they've been below 20% 5 of those games and above 50% 5 of those games. They're almost never in the middle. They've never been between 20 and 35. So they're either freezing cold or white hot which could make the difference. And Paige Beckers is either white hot or white hot. She's just only hot from three. So who do you think wins the battle? We got a couple minutes left. Just a couple of questions to leave you guys on. Who do you think wins the battle from in terms of the backcourt and shooting threes?
I think UConn's going to have the edge there. I do. I think between the way Paige Beckers has been playing the last few games and Kristen Williams has been very good for UConn so the last few games as well. I think UConn might have the edge there. But like I said, I think South Carolina gets the edge in the paint, so should keep it close.
Yeah, definitely. And that 3-point edge for UConn is going to be important because South Carolina is one of 16 teams in the country holding opponents under 50% at the rim. There's only 5 power conference teams doing that. Shout out to CBB Analytics for those numbers. Great website. Go check it out. So even without Boston, obviously you have Ami here. Even Victoria Saxon can block some shots. Really hard to score on at the rim. So they're going to need Paige Beckers to at least keep this hot streak up for one more game, and as well as some other players shooting well behind the arc. Before we get out of here, I want to leave you with one last question. All right. Out of the Aliyahs, who has better hair, Aliyah Boston or Aliyah Edwards?
They both have great hair. I kind of love that Aliyah Edwards is purple and gold for Kobe, so that's pretty cool. But I mean, they both have fantastic hair.
Hard to choose. Yep. All right. So that's all we got. The games are tipping off in less than a minute. Thanks for hanging out with me, Megan, and our listeners. Thanks for hanging out. I should say too, shout out to the third member of our team. In honor of Gabe, I'm gonna shout out to Shay the same way that Gabe does. Shay has been behind the screen doing the clickety clacks or whatever Gabe calls those. So thank you to Shay. Thank you to everyone for hanging out with us.